Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today, especially taking the time out of your schedules. We're really, really happy to host you. At the onset, and especially with the spike in COVID 19 cases recently, we hope that you and your dear ones are doing well and being safe. Before we jump right into it, for those of you who we haven't had the pleasure of interacting with yet, I thought I would give a quick introduction of our company. Zenove is a 19-year-old global strategy and management consulting firm with a core focus on product engineering and digital transformation. Back in the day, Zenove's primary focus was to help global companies set up a footprint in India. But over time, the company has evolved to enable globalization in a much larger way, from helping with digital transformation, go-to-market strategy, location analysis, center maturity assessments, and much more. In India, we are predominantly placed out of Bangalore and Delhi, and globally, we have offices in Seattle, Houston, and most recently, Paris. I work with one of Zenove's practices called the Global Center of Excellence, or the GCOE Accelerator Platform, also known as GAP. As part of this practice, we focus specifically on how global R&D centers can drive maximum value from India. Through our various program offerings, we assist existing centers in terms of how they can expand their scope of work, their level of ownership, and subsequently their maturity in India. We try to look at how they can increase their value contribution from here by assessing what components of their respective value chains can be executed by their teams, all the while not compromising on the country's inherent cost advantages and thriving ecosystem. We also enable connections amongst GCOEs, and we try to facilitate growth in the most collaborative way. An example of the same, and why you're all here with us today, is creating a platform to share thought leadership and domain expertise through our monthly technology webinars, where SMEs from across the ecosystem share their domain expertise on topics that are relevant to and requested by you all. So as you all know, the topic for today's webinar is IoT is the new IT for enterprises during the Industry 4.0 era. As you'll be able to see on the screen, the crux of today's session involves a 45-minute presentation by our keynote speaker, followed by a fireside chat and an open discussion for about 20 minutes, where the speaker and I will delve a little deeper into the topic and answer any and all questions that you may have for him. The market of today is increasingly challenged to adapt to ever-changing conditions, with trade wars, talent wars, managing global supply chains in a global pandemic, and so much more. Many companies recognize Industry 4.0 as a strategic priority to turn these challenges into opportunities. Industry 4.0, or the Industrial Internet of Things, is about industrial transformation using new digital technology that makes it possible to gather and analyze data across machines and business systems, enabling faster, more flexible, and more efficient processes to produce higher quality goods at a lower cost. Technology enablers like IoT, edge computing, big data, artificial intelligence, automation systems, etc., are the drivers for that change. This talk will unlock the meaning of IoT and edge computing and will emphasize on their power to bring real-world data into industrialized processes. Now, what are the key technology ingredients of IoT platforms and productive IoT implementations? How are enterprises leveraging IoT across industries? To help us answer those questions and more, we have Pavan Kumar, who is the Director of Product Management at SAP Labs India, with extensive experience for more than 15 years in building products and working with global customers in emerging and developed markets. His experience and expertise is in the area of IoT, edge computing, sustainability, and analytics. Pavan is an active contributor in the topic of IoT to the Government of India, and also with industry bodies like NASSCOM, TIE, and standard working groups like IEEE, and many more. An avid thought leader, a public speaker, a technical influence, and recently an author as well, Pavan has won many national level accolades in the space of IoT and edge computing. So needless to say, we are extremely grateful to have him with us today to share his expertise. The duration of this webinar will be till 11:30 a.m. And as Sobhan mentioned, we will be entertaining questions which you can continuously send to us via the chat portal on your screen. So without further ado, I would like to hand the session over to Pavan. Just wanted to check if Pavan, are you there? I think there must be a connection on his end. So we'll just wait for a minute. But like I mentioned, please feel free to continuously send questions throughout the course of the session, and we'll try our best to answer them. Pavan, can you hear us?
Hi, Pawan. If you can just switch off your video for a few seconds, I think your audio will be
Yeah,
clear. Yes, now it's all good. I think I can see you. Priyanka, you able to see Pawan?
Yes, I'm able to see him.
okay. How
Pawan,
about
could you
now?
just confirm that you can hear us?
Yes, yes. This is all good as of
Very
now.
well. Yeah, I can. It's all good. Yeah,
Great,
perfect.
wonderful timing. Okay, so Pawan, just without further ado, I'd like to hand over the session to you. But if it's okay, I'd like to try and squeeze in a question before we begin.
Yeah, definitely, Priyanka.
Is that okay?
Yep, sure, definitely.
Great. Uh, given the fact that IoT has become such a buzzword in the recent past, my question to you is, if you were to define IoT in a different way, how would you do it?
Yeah,
And so I'll let you take that on and carry on with your session. Thank you so much, Pawan. Over to you.
yeah, sure, Priyanka. And first of all, thanks for this opportunity, and also, I'm humbled with your, introduction of myself. Yeah, and thanks, Jenna and team. Okay, well, let me just introduce IoT definition from my side. I mean, which is not available in Google. Rather, put it from my words. Yeah, I mean, firstly, the term IoT or Internet of Things was coined by Kevin Ashton in 1999. But the concept of IoT is far older. Yeah, in fact, ATMs, which are considered as the first IoT objects, went online in 1970s actually. At that time, IoT was referred as embedded internet. From then, there are multiple terminologies that came up, maybe machine to machine, web of things, internet of everything, industrial internet, etc., etc. So, but IoT found to be the most popular terminology in describing this interconnected phenomenon. That's how we feel. Now, we can also find formal definitions of IoT in the internet. Let me give an attempt to define IoT by comparing with human being as an analogy. Yeah. Now, human body is equipped with different senses such as touch, sight, hear, smell, and taste, right? Then there is a concept of communication or connectivity. Now, the data coming from these sensors, say your eyes, right? I mean, will be transmitted via nervous system to brain. The brain stores the data. That is your memory, and then it gets contextualized, and then analyzed, and also data gets analyzed, and also conclusions are derived over there, and also a prediction is made on the how to react towards upcoming data streams, right? That is all your mind power. Next, there is a concept of control. When we are running, we see an obstacle in front of us, which makes us our brain to take a conclusion that we need to jump, right? At that point of a time, brain remotely controls our actuators, that is our legs, to execute this jump. Assume that we fell down and we feel pain, right? And then our brain instructs us and sends to a doctor. Now take this example or analogy, right, and apply to IoT. Now IoT also starts with this concept of sensing, right? And machines are all equipped with different sensors which sense their environment, just like our five senses. Now a smart machine with embedded sensors would sense vibrations and sense to the core where the calculations happens. And this core would recognize a pain in the form of the failure data patterns. Yeah, uh, failure data patterns. Okay, now if you observe here, now IoT starts, if you observe here, this is the concept of thing to the data, data to the insight, and insight to action. That actually derives and defines the Internet of Things, right? I mean, this is what the analogy I wanted to drive. Hope it is clear, right? Now let me move on to the session about what is about today's session. Priyanka, you can hear me well, right? Okay.
Yes, I can hear
Now,
you. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Now, I gave an analogy to introduce IoT earlier. Now, let me introduce to the topic of IoT is the new IT for Industry 4.0, correct? Um, IT to IoT is a new phenomenon, right? In other words, IoT is a new IT, right? Every business or an organization, whether emerging or mature, has IT landscapes. We all know that, right? And these IT landscapes cater to multiple processes, such as attendance to time recording, or travel booking to their settlement, or procurement to replenishment process, transportation, logistics, dealing with maintenance, servicing, etc. All these are multiple processes with connected devices, right? IoT signals gets embedded into these processes and turns these processes much more intelligent, intuitive, and interconnected. So in this way, I see IT landscapes evolve towards to be the IoT landscapes. That's the justification I wanted to give with the title. Yeah. Now, I think Priyanka already introduced about myself, so let me not again do that part. Let me get into the story, what I'm going to talk today. So we already had the introduction. Now I'm going to set a quick context about IoT first few minutes, and then I dig deep little into the enterprise IoT technology side of it, and also the customer adoption story. Yeah, before we
Try
finalize with
switching on your video. Seems like the internet is fine. I'm very sure attendees will love to see you.
okay. Yeah.
Great, great. All the very best. Thank you.
I thought I should reduce my weight so that the bandwidth can be consumed. I mean, okay, fine. Now we had set the. I mean, the very first thing what I want to do is to set the context. Yeah. Now you have seen this industrial revolution. If you look at the evolution of technology through the time, the first industrial revolution catered to production. And the second industrial revolution facilitated the mass production. I mean, of course, the electrical energy was the driver or the technology over there. The third industrial revolution facilitated automated production. And that's when the IT or internet was introduced, right? And finally, we are right now in the fourth industrial revolution, which caters to higher productivity and personalized experiences, right? If you look at the transition from the third to fourth industrial revolutions, the internet is straddles between both of these eras, right? And with that, right, internet is going to be one of the main, and IoT is going to be one of the main proponents for the fourth industrial revolution, is what we can say. Now, if we also look at how internet has been evolved, right? Initially, we have seen the internet of content, which helped in the dissemination of the content, where machine to machine were talking to each other. Then we have seen internet of people, where people to people were talking, and then the social networking has gone to the next levels, right? Now we are seeing internet of things, where everything is talking to everything, a machine to person to process, everything are connected, and there is a bidirectional flow of information. That we call it as an internet of things era, right? Now, and sometimes we feel that technology, even though I mentioned, right, in 1970s itself, the ATM was considered as the first IoT object. And if you go to any of the industries, we have seen sensors for multiple decades. It's not nothing new, but it is not about the availability of the technology sometimes, right? It's also about affordability and scalability. The technology will evolve over a period of time. Now, IoT has been heard in the past decade or this decade very often, and it has become very much norm, right? I mean, why is that? There are certain enablers which made that happen. The first one is the sensors. The sensors cost has come down almost by 10 times or 60 times in the past 10 years. Right? I mean, in some countries, people say the potato chips are much expensive than your integrated chips. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the situation. The connectivity also has come down by 40 times in the past 10 years. That we all know, right? Today we are watching videos on the mobile. Earlier we used to pay for the outgoing incoming call as well. Now, with growing number of things getting connected, your phone is getting connected, your alarm is getting connected, your laptop is getting connected. With the growing number of connected devices, we need unique addresses, right? With IPv4, we were able to cater to 2.3 billion unique addresses. Now with the IPv6, we have transformed to IPv6, which can cater to 340 trillion to trillion unique addresses, which means almost every atom on the planet can be connected. Yeah, that many number of addresses we have, so we don't have any problem. Now today we have close to some 6 billion mobile connections, and we also anticipate that close to 8 billion mobile connections are going to be there by 2025. So with all these devices getting connected, sending the data and all that, we need to have data systems, we call that as big data systems, to persist its data and also to analyze this data, right? We do have big data analytics systems available from different vendors, right? One among them is SAP, and many other vendors in the market are available. Now, what analysts are predicting is by 2025, with this many number of enablers, right? 75 billion devices are going to get connected and going to generate 44 zettabyte of data. You know what is zettabyte, right? It's pretty big. Yeah. Now, one point I wanted to warn here as well, it's not about connected devices. Many times people think IoT is about connected devices. No, it's not about connected devices. It's more about how these connected devices can bring value to your business, right? If we have multiple connections. It's not just about connections, right? The similar way here also, it's not about connected devices. Yeah. Now, if you see IoT, IoT has been pursued differently by different individuals. Okay, for some of them it is a Fitbit, for some of them it is a smart washing machine, for some of them it is a smart factory or a smart train, right? So it has been pursued by differently by different individuals. So IoT has a vast number of diverse use cases, and based on the end user segment, if I need to classify them, I can classify them into two ways. One is IoT to consumer, other one is IoT to enterprises. Let me give my attempt to differentiate these IoT use cases, right? So consumer IoT is pretty simple to understand, right? It's about your Fitbit. Most of us were wearing a Fitbit or a wearable or a smart home, and all these come under consumer IoT, where the end user is a single consumer, right? The next one is a commercial IoT. In this case, IoT is applied to a commercial scenario. Here, end consumer may be you and me, but still it runs from commercial perspective. Let me unlock that. How does it work out, right? I mean, I'll take an example. Imagine that you're on a long drive and you stopped at a fuel station. Now, as you refill your fuel, as you refill the fuel in the car, the fuel pump will connect to your car dashboard system, and the retailer offer you a drink or offer you an offer on the drink or a chips or car cleaning liquid or something in your dashboard. How does it happen? Based on the number of seat belts fastened in right in the car, car already know how many people are there. This information is transmitted, and the retailers know, okay, this many people are there, and the offer has been displayed on the dashboard. Not just that, based on the multiple other sensors in the car, right? Your car manufacturer can predict upfront when your car is going to get into a trouble and leaves you a message saying, hey, your car is going to get trouble in under maybe few hours. Why don't you leave it at a nearby service station, right? And also your insurance provider can reduce the premium amount based on the way how you drive the car. Maybe you and me drive, say for example, Priyanka and myself drive the same car and same model, same make, same year we bought. But I'm a very bad driver with a lot of harsh braking and all that stuff. So why we should pay the same premium, right? So based on the sensor data coming from all this, right? I mean, the insurance provider know which driver is good, and for them what kind of premium can be charged, right? So if you look at the scenarios, your retailer is talking to you, your manufacturer is talking to you, and insurance provider is talking to you, and this is a commercial scenario, right? This is a commercial IoT. Now, moving on to the third one, industrial IoT. It's more of a industrial smart grids or factory automation. If you look at, if I take an example of Harley Davidson plant in Pennsylvania, which is considered as one of the visionary plant, which every machine and everything has been connected in such a way that one production line can generate 1,700 different variants. Now, the point here is it's not about 1,700 variants can be generated from one production line so fast. The point is not about fast or speed here. The point is here, the customized bikes can be generated, and also approximately the customized bike can be generated within 6 hours, which was earlier 21 days. So in a way, the customer engagement or the satisfaction is going to next levels, right? On one hand, they're achieving the efficiency, operational efficiency. On other hand, they're taking the customer engagements to the satisfaction to the next levels, right? These kind of examples come under factory automation. They are termed as industrial IoT. Yeah. Hope this is okay. Now, moving on to this is a context I wanted to set about what is IoT and why IoT is now, and we have commercial IoT, we have consumer IoT, we have industrial IoT, right? Now, enterprise IoT is nothing but your commercial and industrial IoT. So now my focus going forward is going to be more about enterprise IoT. Yeah. Now, you can see here the diagram with a lot of components, correct? I mean, these are the components or the critical components that are needed in an IoT platform as such. Okay. First of all, an IoT is an ecosystem play. IoT stack is a multi-layered and is evolved with the convergence of OT, operations technology, which is your hardware, and IT, which is your software. The first two layers, what you see in the white, I differentiated with a white color, right? I mean, that part is your hardware based, which involves the sensor and connectivity, and the rest of them, right? Rest of the modules, what you see there, are the software components. Yeah? I will get into a little more detail in the coming slides. Okay. asset. The smart, we must have heard of smart asset and all that, right? Scientifically speaking, a sensor are transducers, right? In one form, they sense the environment. In other form, they receive the signal and act and activate. For example, in a smart home example, right? A sensor can detect that there is no one in the room, and an actuator can really switch off the your AC or a fan or something, right? So that's the difference between actuator and a sensor. Now the next layer in the hardware is the connectivity. The first one is a sensor, the next one is a connectivity. Connectivity layer is often referred to as communication layer in IoT. Right, and it is the medium over which the sensor data is being transmitted to the IoT applications or IoT platform. Now, this connectivity layer is again classified into three different sub layers. One is your physical layer, which is Ethernet, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LoRaWAN, Zigbee, etc., etc. The next one is network layer, which can be your IPv6, OPC, UA, Modbus, etc. Or your application layer, maybe an HTTP, MQTT, COAP, etc. All this, right? So these are the multiple layers. At the end, the communication layer duty is to get the data from sensors and transmit to your IoT applications or IoT platform. So exactly what the nervous system used to do with the example what I gave earlier, right? Now, if you look at this picture in the slide, if you take a smart enterprise cooler like a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi cooler, right, a beverage cooler in a supermarket, these devices are no more shy devices. They are equipped with sensors, what I talked about. They're equipped with actuators. They're equipped with connectivity gateways as well, so that they can transmit some useful information like what I showed in the slide: location, temperature, power status, door openings, etc., etc. Now, by transmitting this information, right, they provide a lot of transparency to the sales guy, saying, oh, what is the health, how good is my health of the device, or how good the device has been accessed, how many times the door has been opened, how many bottles were taken out of the door, etc. A lot many insights we can get. Once we have the sensors, we get insight. The more the number of sensors you have, the more the insights you get. As simple as that, right? They're directly proportionate. So now, what I would like to say, the smart device or a smart asset or IoT asset, we all call this synonymously, we use these terminologies, is nothing but an physical asset glued with sensors, actuators, and the gateways which can transmit the data. Okay. The next one is a device connectivity layer. This device connectivity layer is more like a glue between your hardware, what we have seen, and the software. Right? What the role of this device connectivity layer is to authenticate the device. Now, multiple devices can connect to your platform software, correct? Now, you can't allow every device to be connected. Maybe one of them can be a virus one or maybe unauthorized one, right? So, like how you onboard employees to your company, in a similar way, this device connectivity layer in the IoT platform will take care of, authenticating the device, maybe via certificate-based mechanism or multiple mechanisms that exist. Via such mechanisms, right? This particular module will authenticate the device and connect the device to the software world. That's the first step it does. The second step is the connection is established, right? Now we know this device is authentic. Now, the next thing is to understand different protocols. Like I already mentioned, the communication layer will transmit the data via different forms with different protocols. Now, device connectivity layer has to understand all this and get the data into the software platform. Right now, the another task of this device connectivity layer is managing the bulk devices. We are talking about IoT means millions and billions of devices. Right now, someone has to manage this onboarding of devices, managing multiple connections, and also offboarding, decommissioning, etc. Right. So this will be taken care by device connectivity. In one of the example where one of the customer we connected 3 million. Refrigerators to the platform. So who has to manage? The device connectivity has to manage. Right? In sometimes these devices may be most age-old industry systems with having a lot of so old protocols or very secured protocols. Now device connectivity layer has to take care of all that thing and understand the language of these age-old systems and gets the data in. Okay. Then the next layer, what we talk at the end to conclude, right? The device connectivity layer acts as a glue between your software and hardware. Okay, your software and hardware. The hardware is your physical asset embedded with sensors and connectivity, and your software is our IoT application and platform, right? The device connectivity is a key and acts as a glue. Okay. Now, the next one is about a digital twin. Okay, digital twin is a terminology which you must have heard multiple times, right? I mean, the companies uses machines, equipments, robots, vehicles, and many other connected devices to run their business, right? In a broader sense, an asset, and this asset is a resource controlled by the company. Now, a digital representation of this particular physical asset is a kind of a digital twin. And what this digital twin stores is the identification information, operational, technical, status information of the asset over its entire of the life cycle. So it can be a financial and contractual information, right, maintained in the ERP, or a deprecation, maintenance, OPCU information, or technical diagrams, usage instructions, maintenance recommendations, service history, repair instructions, HS data. Lots of data related to this particular asset is available across multiple locations, right? All this is being tied to this particular asset and is maintained as a digital twin in your IoT platform. So in a crude way, I know many of them may not like, in a crude way, if I need to explain, it's a metadata record in the database representing your physical asset, storing all this information. Yeah. And if you look at this diagram, what you have seen is a smart truck, correct? And the truck is embedded with sensors and all that. And the first one is more about your identification information about VIN number, registration number, etc. and all. And this truck is embedded with sensor. This is all operation information, right? And what kind of sensors it has got, how often they send the data is all has been maintained. And also asset data located in your master data systems is also associated. And also your invoice, maintenance history, who has ownership to this particular truck, etc. So all this information is being with the digital twin. Okay. Priyanka, hope I'm not going too fast. I just wanted to double check with you. Yeah.
No, all good, Pawan. Please continue.
Okay. Fine. Now, in the step number 1, we introduced what is a smart product. A smart product, and it has got sensor and connectivity, right? In the second step, we told how to connect this product, hardware product or an asset, right, to a software platform. That's where we introduce the device connectivity. Device connectivity will take care of that. And within the software, we talked about digital twin, which is a kind of a representation of your physical asset. That also we talked about it. Now imagine multiple devices are connected, right? Now what's next? The devices will send the data. Each of them can be having multiple sensors. If you take a simple cooler, it will have 4 sensors or 5 sensors or 10 sensors. Or if you take an aeroplane, it may have 3,500 sensors. We have worked with trained customers. They have some 1,500 sensors, right? I mean, it depends upon the kind of asset over there, right? At the end, all these assets were connected to your platform. Now the data flows in. Right? It's like a water coming, right? You have a lot of water and there is the pipe. So some pipeline should be maintained to take this data of what data flow, right? So the ingestion pipeline is the next critical module which is needed, which handles this data inflow from the physical asset. So if you look at the ingestion pipeline, there are 2 critical components. One is the message broker, an industry grade message broker, something like a Kafka or many others are available, and Kafka could be one example. The purpose of message broker is to make sure all data is reliably buffered in the system, even when there are unusual spikes in the number of incoming messages hitting the system, or ensuring the follow-up components are down to buffer the data for some more time. In some cases, which is extremely practically, there are latecomers. We assume, oh, we connected a device, it doesn't mean that the data appears over there immediately. There are many times the data appears late, maybe 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late. We have seen practically in some cases, whenever the truck enters a tunnel, maybe for 15 minutes the data transmission never happens. Once the truck goes out of the tunnel, that's when the data comes into the system. So these kind of practical difficulties will be there, and someone has to ensure the data which has been pushed from the sensor needs to be buffered here before they relay to the follow-up components, right? The data should not get lost somewhere. Yeah, that will be taken care by your message broker. Now that's fine. The next one is a message processing. Spark is one good example technology where it can be taken care of this message processing. Sparks allow you to distribute the calculations over multiple cluster nodes, ensuring huge amount of data can be processed parallelly at the same time. Yeah, and so the message broker and the message calculation streaming. These are the one of two main components that are used. The next one is the validation of the incoming data. That's extremely important. For example, you are getting a temperature value as 50,000, right? And the temperature and that particular temperature is sensor is located in a refrigerator. So you need to validate whether, I mean, when from the data transmission perspective, 50,000 is an integer, right? It's all good. It's an integer, you're getting an integer, it's all good. But from the semantic perspective, that is wrong. A temperature sensor fitted in a freezer cannot send a 50,000 value. It's an absurd, right? That kind of a validations need to be done and filter out all this junk that gets in, right? That kind of a validations needs to be done. These are not rules. Again, we have to be very careful. This is all about validating the authenticity of the data. Maybe the sensor is gone. It's no more working, or it has been hacked, or it can be anything else, right? So validation is important. The next one is a mapping. And if this is also one of the practical implementation problem. So if I have a sensor temperature, if I have a sensor of pressure, every time, every second, the sensor will not send the data like temperature as a word and then 4 degrees, temperature as a word and 5 degrees for the next second. No, because it consumes a lot of bandwidth that will attract a lot of cost for the company, right? So you must be sending T5, T6, T7, something like in a coded way, in such a way that you can save the bandwidth and you can save the money. So you need to ensure, but that is not readable. What is T here? Is it torque or temperature? Don't know, right? If I get a message from the sensor in the software as T as a 5 or a 10, is it a torque or temperature? I don't know. Correct? So converting that data into human readable format is also should be taken care by this kind of an ingestion pipeline. Yeah. Now, and also ingestion pipeline has to take care of different sensor types that are semantically aligned with an aligned model. Yeah, I mean, you may have most sophisticated sensors associated with your mobile phone, whereas if you go with an industrial setup, the sensors are pretty old and they give the data in different way. At the end, when the data comes to the software world, it has to be maintained in a similar way and persisted in a similar way. I have put some of the examples over here. If you look at, these are all again the practical examples we worked with. If you take a fleet scenario, 2,000 vehicles get connected and then they send data every 4 minutes, right? Which is 7.5 lakh messages per day. The ingestion pipeline has to handle. If you take a train scenario, 500 trains sending 1 billion data points in a day, your ingestion pipeline has to take care. Or if you take a cooler scenario, which is the number of devices are more, number of coolers are more, which is your 5 lakh coolers, whereas ingestion frequency is very less, 4 messages per hour. Even then they generate 4.8 million messages. Now, how do you handle all this? This has the job of ingestion pipeline to take care of incoming data flow, right? Now, you understood now the data is getting entered and then you have a pipeline which takes care of, the data, right? And what is next? Data is coming and then you need to store somewhere, right? And that is when your big data systems comes into picture. Now, if you talk about the kind of data that comes from IoT sensors, one is your raw time series data, which is very clear, understood. The next one is a calculated time series data. What is this calculated time series data? Sensor data by themselves, they are very naive. For example, if you take a fill level sensor, a fill level sensor will be fitted on the top of the lid in a bottle or a container, will give the distance from the top to the level of the liquid in the bottle. It will not give the fill level, it will give the distance. Now, one has to convert this distance with the dimensions of the object to a fill level, right? Or a read sensor will give something else. It won't give you how much time the door has been opened if it is fitted to a cooler. It will only tell the event. Now one has to calculate and derive the door open time. So the sensors gives naive values many times, and one has to calculate and derive business understandable values from these naive values. Yeah, that is what we call as a calculated data. Now the time series aggregates. So many times the sensor data is very huge, right? I mean, you sometimes you don't need every point. What you need is a kind of aggregated data. What is the average temperature in the past 1 hour? I don't want temperature at every moment. Rather, I need average temperature in the past 1 hour. What is the maximum temperature in the past 1 hour? Right? That kind of an aggregated data is needed sometimes. And finally, another interesting aspect is your segment data. I call it as a segment. A time series segment is defined by start and end time having a similar context. What does it mean? Imagine there's a drilling machine. Drilling machine has a sensor. The drilling machine doesn't always will be in a idle state, right? I mean, only sometime in a day it gets into a real working mode, correct? Then why do you are not interested throughout the day of data of sensor data of the drilling machine? Rather, what you are interested with is when the drilling is happening, when the drilling started and drilling ended, during that time you wanted to monitor certain parameters of the machine. Or you take a vehicle is in a parking place. You don't care much all the sensor data. Maybe some sensors, yes, still you care, but not all the data. What you care is when the trip started and the trip ended. During this particular time segment, you need to monitor certain parameters. That we call it as a time series segment. So sensor data, so we have observed here, right, in this example, your raw time series data is the raw, as the name says, that comes from the sensor. And you have the calculated data that someone calculates, you have aggregated data, and then you have segmented data. All this is huge, right? Lots of data. Now, where do you store all this? You need to store in a tiered big data storage, right? Now, imagine again, I'll take an analogy here. So you have lots of clothes. Everyone has lots of clothes, right? I mean, while during the offers, we buy certain clothes and they becomes too much sometimes, right? Now, some clothes what you wear every day, you keep it in a nearby cupboard, right? And some of them which you wear occasionally once in a week, you keep in a little more far cupboard, right? And some of them, like maybe very fancy one, we may wear once in a 3 months, once in a six months occasionally. You'll keep somewhere far. You don't want to throw it, but you want to keep it and use extremely occasionally, right? So you arrange your dress accordingly the way you wanted to access. Exactly in a similar way, this big data storage typically needs this kind of a tiered way of storage. The data what you need immediately for your applications or for your UI, that needs to be stored in something called hot storage. That storage can be an expensive one and very fast from the performance perspective. You can pick up such a hot storage and put the data over there. Now the data which is a raw time series data, you can keep in a warm storage. You need it, but not occasionally. And the data which you don't want to disregard, but you wanted to archive it, but still you need it, right? Such data, you keep it in the cold storage. So you understood it. This should be, I mean, you can't keep everything in the same place. That will attract cost as well as that will attract performance. You need to keep this kind of data in a tiered way. Okay. Now, the next one is about the contextualization. So as I mentioned, one of the examples in the past, if a temperature sensor fitted into a cooler, that's a different. The same temperature sensor fitted into a microwave oven, it's a different. The context is different. So you always need the context and business context, right? So in this example, what you see in the diagram, if you take a silo embedded with sensors, it can have a lot of business context, right? One is your sensor data, which is okay, right? Apart from the sensor data, you need to have the business data, something like what is the material? Is it a grain or a cement? Do we have sensors to figure out what grain is that? Maybe, may not be at all, right? Or there can be, but they're expensive. So, but this is a master data. We don't figure out via your sensor. It has to come from business system, right? And then food ingredients or the animal feed. It can be anything. To asset information, who owns this? when this has to be maintained, when this has to be repaired, who will come and do the repair, etc. If something goes wrong, whom should we contact, which servicing company we should talk to. All this information is maintained in the master data systems, right? And also any already service request has been made with this particular equipment repair, and all that information is also maintained. So this is all your business context. Now this business context is definitely needed, and that has to be blended with your sensor data. I'll come on to that in the next slide. Yeah. So what I mean by in this picture is, this is your raw time series chart, which looks so plain, and then there you have the colored master data, and you're adding color to the raw time series chart, which is nothing but you're contextualizing the sensor data. So if there is a problem with if a temperature sensor is fitted onto a cooler, and the cooler is located in 5th floor of an Italian restaurant in MG Road in Bangalore, and if something goes wrong, we need to call someone from Shivaji Nagar, which is a nearby place from the MG Road. That is the context, right? If a cooler report a wrong temperature over a period of time, and then your rules figured out there's a problem, you need to have access to business data. You can't simply say, hey, there is a problem with cooler. Rather, if you have the business data blended, you know whom to go and raise a request, and you know whom to really get involved, right? That's exactly the contextualizing your sensor data. This is also one of the key aspect in the platform. Yeah. Now you have this data contextualization. Right. What next? You have the data, you got the data, you stored the data in big data store. You also added some color, right? The color is nothing but your master data and business data. And then what next? You have everything. The infrastructure is ready. There are two things we do. The first one, we analyze the data for anomalies, right? I mean, you have the sensor data, you have to analyze if there is a problem. The second one, we feed this data to an application, we do some analytics, we do some prediction, etc. These are the two ways we do. Right? Let's look at the analyzing via rules. If you take any typical rules engine of IoT platform, right? This is a crux, by the way. Getting the data is important, but after getting the data and storing the data, you need to really analyze mistakes, right? Anomalies. Otherwise, what is the fun of getting all the data and storing somewhere? Correct. Now, typically, we observe 2 to 3 different kinds of rules that exist in IoT platforms. Yeah, the first one is a rule on if the data is coming from the sensor continuously, one has to identify anomaly in a very simple conditional way. Say, for example, if it is a temperature sensor, I want to know if the temperature is greater than 20 and the status is vehicle is moving. Okay, this could be your simple rule. The another kind of rule, what we call is a batch rule, or rules on a persistent data, right? Where you are not interested just on the incoming sensor data, but you are interested with an aggregated data, which means I wanted to know what is the average temperature in the past 1 hour. If the material stored in the container is milk, or material or if the temperature permissible for milk, if what is the average temperature in the past 1 hour if the material stored is beer, right? Now whether it is a milk or beer, it comes from your master data system, and average temperature is a calculated data. Like I mentioned, for 1 hour means you need to navigate through last 1 hour data and do an average, right? Correct. So that's why these kind of rules, we call it as rules on persistent data and master data. Right. The third kind of rule, your sensor itself is not sending anything. Gone mute. Someone pulled out the sensor and then thrown it out. So you are not getting any data to analyze, or the sensor by itself gone wrong. It's not working. In such scenario as well, you need to figure out. We call that as a sensor mute, like sensor gone mute. Right. Such kind of rules also exist. So across all this, what are we doing? We are trying to identify anomalies in different ways and creating events and take some actions. Correct? Yeah. Now, there are a few other rules also. There are a few other aspects that need to be taken care in the IoT world of IoT. Yeah, it's extremely important. In the very first project I implemented in the IoT, I configured a rule: temperature greater than 10 for a refrigerator, and then 50,000 refrigerators were connected. Within a day, I got some 75,000 emails. You know why? Because Whenever the temperature is crossed beyond 10, you get an alarm, you get an event, you get an alert, right? So sometimes it is extremely important to ensure the rule is made intelligent way. For example, if the temperature gone above 10, maybe it takes some cooling period to come back as well, right? Maybe the door of the cooler has been frequently opened. Maybe it's an ice cream freezer nearby a school, and students come during interval and they keep on open for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It takes time to adjust the temperature, correct? So if you know such things, you need to consider all those in your rules engine. Otherwise, it will spam you. It will irritate you. You have to be very careful about it. So if you observe these two examples, what I mentioned, there should be a way in your rules engine to tell, hey, either you wait for an hour. I know there is a maintenance work is going to happen and the fridge will be kept open for next 3 hours. So just ignore all the values coming from the sensor and don't unnecessarily spam with all the alerts. I know for the next 3 hours, switch off the rule. Don't bother much. That information needs to be told, right? Or I know when the event happens, wait for again the event happens, such kind of a thing. Or wait for next consecutive 40-50 times, only then you raise an alert. So you need to have some control on the rules engine as well to ensure that won't spam you. I mean, these are a couple of examples I quoted there, multiple examples. How do you control your rules engine? Otherwise, I'm sure you will end up with a lot of spam. Okay. Now, there are few other rules that we figured out are geo rules. Well, geo is location based, correct? So if the truck here is moving, if it enters into a relevant geofence, raise an alert. Sometimes if we can use this fencing also for calculating multiple other values. For example, if you recollect, I talked about derived data, correct? Say for example, you look at the second picture. Yeah, a truck is entering the warehouse and then exiting the warehouse. That means fence, it's entered, and fence exit. I know the time of entry and the time of exit. So during this time, the loading, we call it as a loading time. The truck entered the warehouse, loaded with the material. So this is we call it as a loading time. Now the truck left the warehouse and entered the plant. We call this as a driving time, right, in this example. And again, the truck spent some time in the plant and exited the plant, then unloading time. So you can sometimes derive the data also from your sensor data as well as the events that happens over a period of time. Yeah, there's also some possibilities we can do. The third example, what I mentioned is there is a thing or an asset which is not supposed to move. A truck is a free bird which can move, but whereas a cooler in a showroom or some other asset in equipment in a factory, it should not move. Imagine that gets moved. Okay, you raise an alert when that gets moved. So these are the geo alerts or geo-based alerts, we call it. Now, rules engine nicely did its job in identifying the anomalies and raised events. Hey, this gone wrong, that gone wrong. Okay, good. So what next? That's not it, right? Once the identification of issues has been there, the next step is to trigger the action. The action needs to be triggered, correct? So now the action can be an email notification, an alert notification in your application, or it can be an action in the business system, like creating a service request or a sales order and all. Or finally, the action can be triggering something back in the device. In one of the customer's case, if something goes this way, you adjust the feed of the fan in the air purifier. This is what the rule they have created. Simple, right? Action on the device itself. So these actions are extremely important because at the end, it is not just about raising alarms. It's also about triggering the corrective actions as well. Correct? Next one is about applications and analytics. Yeah. Now, applications, the sensor data, the contextualized sensor data can be fed even for applications as well as analytics as well, and they can be used. And of course, the sensor data is used for creating multiple analytics. Can be a streaming analytics, like you wanted to see raw time series charts, or you wanted to see operational analytics, something like how many times my equipment like a generator gone wrong in the past 1 month. this kind of an operational analytics or machine learning models. You can feed this data to machine learning system or predictive analytics, etc. And then this data can be leveraged in all these aspects for the next steps. Yeah. Just to give a gist of what kind of analytics, right? A simple door open sensor can give you a different insight. For example, I'm not bothered about seeing the door open count on the dashboard. If a door of a cooler has been opened 20 times in a day, I don't care how many times it has been opened. What I care is aggregated number of door openings by a store or cooler type or something else will give you more idea to me or more insight to me. Or this door opening count correlated with the campaign that has been run. Let's say a campaign has been run during the Christmas period, and then the cooler door has been opened in that particular area a lot many times during the campaign. Then I know the campaign is effective. When you overlay this marketing information with the door open information, that's when you see the value. I really don't care about how many times the door has been open normally, right? In a similar way, the power status or location or temperature, all these things can be, it's not about, where is my cooler existing. It's more about compliance, whether the cooler is there at the right location or it has been there in the wrong location. Power status, I don't care how many times the power has been on and off for that particular equipment. Rather, what I care is, as per the contractual agreement, how many times this particular dealer has been breached the contract. I care about that. I don't care about how power is right now on or off, maybe, right? So what I'm trying to convey here is, it's not about the sensor data by itself. It's about the business insight, what you get. Yeah, is important as part of the analytics. Now, if I need to switch them, all of them together, you can see, sorry. If I stitch all of them together, you can see the smart device equipped embedded with the sensors, actuators, and SIM cards or whatever the connectivity technology, the hardware, and the glue piece is your device connectivity. Via the glue piece, the data gets into the software part. That's where your digital twin and then ingestion pipeline, and the data gets stored in the store, and then finally it gets contextualized. Once the data is contextualized, you are feeding into the rules engine to trigger certain actions, or you are feeding that to applications or analytics for detailed analysis. So do you see the end-to-end basic components that are needed for the platform? Yeah. Now, moving on to the next, right? I mean, if I look at the enterprise IoT landscape, the centerpiece is your platform. The data can enter to this platform in multiple ways. The device can directly connect to the platform, or the device can connect via edge computing module, or the device can connect via telco cloud. This is the most popular way of connecting, because what happens with an enterprise and very big setups, every of these companies have tie-up with a telco company, and the telco company takes care of IoTizing their equipment. Say there's a factory, and this factory is being given to a telco company who takes care of all the IoTization. So as part of that, the data goes to their cloud, the telco cloud, and the telco cloud provides the data to the IoT platform, right? So this is one of the practical possibility what we observe. And if you take the age-old systems, and data can come through via OPC UA to IoT platform. Now you have all the time series data and all the sensor data over here in the middle box. From the rightmost box, from the backend business system, you are getting the business data, okay, which I marked as 3, right? The data, business data, and the blending of the sensor data and business data happens in the IoT platform. Now this data is being exposed to different users via different ways. Maybe a business analyst wanted to build some analytics on top of it, or a data scientist want to do a prediction or ML algorithm, or an business user wanted to consume that in an application, maybe a smart city application, or a cold chain monitoring application, or a supply chain application, something like that. So net to net, this is a very simplified view of an enterprise IoT landscape. Yeah. Okay, now I'll take maybe another few minutes, Priyanka, is that okay?
Sure, Pawan, no worries.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you recollect in the very initial stages, I mentioned every company and every organization has business processes, and every processes is getting embedded with IoT signals, right? What is this embed? What do you mean by embed means? Let me uncover with one of the practical example. Okay, let's take a company called Fruits Inc. Fruits Inc. is a company. I mean, I kind of anonymous. It's a real-time example, by the way. Fruits Inc. is a company which does jams, which does flavors and all that. Okay. Now, this company, okay, has certain suppliers, and they supply sugar as a raw material, and the sugar is stored in a silo. Okay. Now, what Fruits Inc. does is they process this raw material by mixing with a fruit, say for example strawberry, and makes a strawberry jam. Okay, and they put the strawberry jam into containers or container trucks and send it to their customers. And what their customers do further again is they further process it. They mix with curd, yogurt, curd, and then they kind of make a flavored yogurt. And they kind of sell it in the retail stores. It's a simple process, right? It looks simple process. No scenario. Now in this, what this company wanted is they want to ensure they are never out of the sugar. They are never out of the sugar. If they are out of sugar, the stocks are out of sugar, then the production process will be halted, right? At the same time, they want to ensure, since they are supplying this jam or preservatives to their customers, they want to ensure, they upfront want to know by when their customers are consuming, so that they always supply with a lead time in place, right? So at the end, net to net, what they wanted to do is they wanted to optimize the replenishment process. Simple. They wanted to make replenishment process very much intelligent in such a way that on one hand, they don't want it to get delayed from their suppliers. On the other hand, they don't want to supply late to their customers. Simple, right? Now, if I take this customer, Fruits Inc., they have this business process, and in that they have these devices, right? I mean, they put all the sugar in the silo. What they want to do is they wanted to monitor the fill level of sugar. Whenever it is going down or based on the consumption, just trigger a replenishment process. They also want to monitor certain quality parameters like temperature, humidity is maintained in the silo. Okay, whenever there is an anomaly, some alerting should be there in the place. That's what they wanted. And the second thing is they are putting all their jam or artificial flavors and all into the container, shipping to their customers, right? They want to again ensure track and trace of this movement of these containers. They also want to ensure how quickly the material is getting consumed, so that these people can supply in advance. And third and most importantly, they wanted to adjust dynamically the expiry date based on the storage conditions. A very simple concept, right? If we keep the milk outside in our home, we have to consume it fast. As simple as that. If we keep in refrigerator, we can consume tomorrow also, right? In the same way, based on the real-time sensor data, based on the storage conditions of that particular material, you dynamically, I know that it will expire ideally by maybe 7th of April, but based on the dynamical storage conditions, this particular date needs to be advanced a bit, right? That's one of the use case. That I call it as a IoTized business process. Now, this is a pretty lengthy diagram, but to cut short, the bottommost layer, which is in gray, is your physical device. The topmost layer is your ERP system, and in between is your IoT platform. Now, you can correlate with the components what I explained earlier, right? So your sensor, fill level sensor located in your silo, will send the sensor data. As I mentioned, that gives only distance. One has to convert the distance to a fill level. Fill level means how much sugar is available in the silo, right? That will be done by your derivation piece. And then your data gets stored in the big data store. And then you are going to have a rule like, okay, if fill level goes below 10%, raise an alert. That's a rule. What is important is you need to have some advanced rules. If fill level goes below 10%, it will be below 10% only until it gets replenished, right? And it won't happen like this. It takes few days, it takes few hours, till then you get spam, right? What is important is you need to understand how quickly am I consuming the sugar. Maybe the last 10% I might consume in 10 days, 10 hours or 10 minutes. Now, based on the consumption rate, I create a replenishment order. If I'm going to take 10 more days, it's okay. I no need to create the high priority replenishment order, right? Or if it is going to get consumed in 10 minutes, yes, of course, I need to probably expedite, correct? So what is important, your logic lies in the rules engine. It's not just about fill level going down. It's more about how quick are you consuming based on the consumption rate, based on the lead supply, the suppliers which can supply in the lead time, right? I mean, there can be 3-4 suppliers in your area, but this particular supplier with whom you have a contract supplies quick. Maybe that particular supplier you want to reach out. For them, create a purchase requisition order. And in the backend ERP system, the order has been created and the suppliers fill the silo with the sugar. Now, right? Now, look at this second column, right? Now, the sensor again identified that the fill level has been again increased, right? Because replenishment happened. Now again, based on the rules, rule will figure out, oh, there is a replenishment happened, and the order quantity is 1,000 kilograms. Whereas, you know, based on the sensor data, we figured out that the quantity is 990. There's a mismatch, right? That kind of a mismatches can be figured out, or if there is all good, then issue a goods receipt. Now the point here is business process is same. We are not changing the business process, but we are introducing some sort of intelligence to the business process, right? And another very quick and related example I can quote what we did in the past is, if there are there is a vending machine located at certain point is out of stock. Okay, there's a last bottle of cola has been vended, but the next day is an holiday. So there is no need, and it is located in office premises, no one will be there. So in that case, you no need to really rush and create an order. In other case, yes, there is an event ongoing and there is a truck of the same cola company carrying surplus amount of cola, then you call that particular truck and say, hey, why don't you come and replenish me here quickly first? So what are you doing here? The same, it's a replenishment process is same, but you are intelligently taking the decisions, and this intelligence is being built and provided by the IoT sensors. Yeah, I'll skip probably the edge computing part given the time, and as edge computing, just to be very quickly explained, right? So most of these IoT devices sends the data, right, I mean, to the cloud for the processing. And many a times there could be bandwidth issues, or there could be intermittent connectivity, or there could be, you know, cost issues as well. If it is a camera, you can't send 24/7 data all the way to cloud, right? So because of the cost, because of the bandwidth, sometimes it is needed to do certain processing at the edge itself, at the device itself. That we call it as a edge computing. Yeah. Technically, an edge can be an IoT, a gateway, or a PC or Raspberry Pi or something. Functionally, it can be a train or a cooler or an equipment, a drill machine, etc., etc. So if you do everything at the edge, it becomes an on-premise. You have to be carefully differentiate what is edge computing and on-premise. If you do everything at edge, it becomes an on-premise. What I'm trying to say is, some set of processing you do at edge and some you do at the cloud, and you orchestrate both. That we call it as, you know, cloud edge hybrid. That is what is needed for the enterprise world. Yeah. So if I take one of the private shipping company example, this particular company has got, you know, 250 shipping vessels, and, you know, they have 5,000 shippers. Yeah. And these ships are on OH for almost 8 months. During their OH, right, I mean, they have very limited bandwidth and they have only satellite connectivity. And that is used primarily for the critical ship operations. Okay. Now within the ship, there are certain HR related or financial transactions when the ship goes to a shore and they buy certain items like bonded items like telco cards or spare parts, ropes and all. Some transactions happens. All these things needs to be managed, right? So the idea of edge computing here is, without having the connectivity, you locally process everything in the offline mode. When the signal is back, you synchronize that with the cloud. That is what I call it as business continuity, by extending the business process to the edge location. Yeah, this is one example of the edge computing. Now, if you look at how customers are consuming IoT, the first one is, you know, every company wanted to improve their productivity. with IoT in place. And we have seen with the silo example of, replenishment. How do I optimize replenishment process, and how can I make that process more efficient and save more money, right? That we have already seen. The second way, customers wanted to improve the customer experience. Say, for example, if I'm a manufacturer of heating and cooling machines, and I put my machines in one of the industry, I want to upfront know when this particular machine is going to fail, and I need to know also the reason why it is failing, and I feed all the data with in a sales technician mobile app and send to him. So that, imagine the sales technician goes to the consumer premises and say, hey, we know that your equipment what you have is going to fail, and we also know the reason. We already came with the spare parts, we are going to repair it. That's exactly can be done by proactively predicting the issues and immediately identifying where can the spare parts are there and procure them and go to the customer locations and fix it. Here, it's not only about improving efficiency, the customer also feels so great about it, and you are elevating the customer experience. The third one is a new business model. While customers spend a lot of time in improving the efficiency and improving the customer experience, they end up in forming new business models. For example, purified air as a service. One of these customers with whom we worked, they initially embedded sensors into the air purifier to ensure they monitor the air pollutants and all that. Eventually, they also figured out when can they replace the filter in the air purifier. And eventually, they also evolved in such a way that if I know when I can refill the filter, why can't I give the air purifier as a product, as a service to the end consumer, and I charge based on the purified air. In India, one of the customer is doing the same thing with the water purifier. They don't sell the water purifier, rather they kind of sell the purified water as a service in a similar way, because you already have the data, you already have the monitoring data of how much consumption happened, when the equipment is going to fail, when you need to repair, when you need to refill everything, right? Right. So the new business models also are evolving. And finally, the extending the business process to edge location. I already explained about the ship example. There's one more case, which is pretty interesting, where a cereal bar company, the cereal bar set, what we eat sometimes as a breakfast, the cereal bar, they manufacture cereal bar. Okay. And when the cereal bar breaks or something, that goes waste, someone has to manually put it out. Now, what this company does is, they have put a camera over there in the production line which monitors for the cereal bar, and that data has been sent to the machine learning model in the cloud. Okay, that is being matched with the perfect samples, and the trained model is put at the edge location. Now, whenever the camera captures the new cereal bar, it gets validated with the trained model at the edge to figure out whether the bar is proper or not proper. If not proper, reject the bar. So train the model in the cloud and deploy at the edge, right? This is an example of another customer who uses edge computing. So to sum up, I think I kind of ran through quite fast, but to sum up, right, just as Internet of People, which is your social networking, right, has changed the world, the next phase is Internet of Things, which will also change the world, turning the enterprise landscapes into much more intelligent, intuitive, and interconnected for higher productivity and greater experiences. So hope this clarifies how IoT is becoming new IT for enterprises in the Industry 4.0. Priyanka,
thank you so much.
I'll stop trying now.
No worries. I can actually see a handful of messages to us commending the content and the relatable examples in your presentation. And I think someone's also mentioned that they wish you had been their professor in engineering college, which is a very, very good compliment in my opinion.
So I should not stop then. Okay. So someone is ready to offer.
No, absolutely not. We definitely have a backup plan.
Thank you.
So I actually, as usual, I do have a lot of questions and a couple of aspects that I'd like to pick your brains about. But I do see quite a few audience questions here already. So I think in the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll prioritize the audience questions and then kind of throw mine in as and when relevant.
Definitely, yeah. Perfect. Great. Perfect. Yeah.
So, the first question, and this is actually something I wanted to ask as well, is you shared really interesting examples throughout, right? And you touched upon the use of IoT and edge computing in FruitSync and another for cereal bars, so the FMCG industry. You mentioned an example with the shipping industry. You mentioned something with water purifiers. So I think the overarching question that I have, and then I'll comment on an audience question as well, is there a particular suitability for IoT applications when it comes to a type of product or industry, or can it be be used horizontally? And a specific audience question is, how can we use IoT in banking systems? Can we use it for customer data audit and alerting us for any problem?
Okay. So first of all, if you take two different, I'll take examples of two different IoT use cases. Whether it is a cooler, you take a refrigerator like a beverage cooler in a shop, may have 4 sensors and sense the data. And you have an aeroplane or a train having few thousands of sensors sense the data again. In both the cases, the technology and the platform wise or the components are going to be the same. The only thing that differs is the amount of data and the complexity of the rules you have, the complexity of analysis you have. How do you stretch each of these components vary? So IoT as such, the modules what I explained is going to be the same for both the scenarios, whether it is an aerospace or a banking or finance or manufacturing, doesn't matter. The underlying services they should consume is going to be the same. Maybe you stretch certain services to an extent for this particular use case, simple. Now coming to the finance exactly, I mean, finance sector is something where the manual intervention is little less, right? I mean, so there can be a possibility of less usage, but there could be one example I can think of, one of the company, which I can't take the name, where what they did is they have introduced the changes to their debit card. The way they swipe you can't swipe the debit card in the ATM machine, right? They've introduced changes, sorry, not to the debit card, to the ATM machine itself. Now, they don't know, for some reason, the transactions has come down very slow. They don't know why. Even they don't know the reason is because of this. So what they did is they kind of embedded, put the camera over there and identified the eye pattern or the frustration. I mean, you can calculate multiple emotions, right, from the patterns. They figured out that people are finding it extremely difficult to use the machine and they're leaving the place. This could be one example. So you need to identify the areas where IoT can be applied over there. Or in another supermarket, not supermarket, it's a retail store. They have lots of kiosks. Say one kiosk has a jeans and t-shirt and all. Other kiosk has a women dress now. Now, what this particular company wanted to know is what is the favorite path has been taken in the supermarket or the store, like your stop, right? What is the favorite path? The trouser is here, whereas the dressing room is somewhere far away. So it's very inconvenient. And they also figured out that there's so much of crowd at the trouser. Many people are, and we call it as a footfall, right? Many people are visiting the store, that particular trouser kiosk, jeans kiosk, but no one is buying. So you are analyzing that sensor data with the POS system data and see there is a mismatch. Either it could be because the models are messy over there, or the models are there but the sizes are not there, or there is no one there to help you at all. There could be 100 reasons, right? But here there is an aspect of human is involved, right? And then under this system of record is your POS system. POS system will tell, okay, this particular jeans has been sold only in the past 1 month. So when you blend these two data, you get an insight. So even in the finance or any other case, you need to figure out such kind of scenarios where there can be a possibility of manual mistake. Yeah, that could be the one.
Got it. So, I mean, that's actually super interesting. I think the one trend that I'd call out, which you touched upon as well, is that the IoT of the future seems to be used best in terms of understanding consumer behavior. And so businesses are kind of leveraging that to see how they can work around their consumer insights, right? And then obviously, like you mentioned,
maybe I'm again more tempted. I'm sorry. I'm tempted to give one more example, right? I mean, if you remember that very childhood days in the Kirana shop, we go to a Kirana shop, and then store guy will say, hey, you know what, Pawan, your friend came and took this orange juice. Why don't you buy? He told it's very nice. Then I go and buy and take it, right? What is he doing? He's cross-selling, right? He's selling to me. He saw we both go roam around every day. He know that we both are close friends. If he is buying orange drink, I'm also going to buy orange drink, right? Same thing what the retailers also adopting, right? I mean, some of the examples is like, we call this as a one-to-one hyper context sensitive algorithm, right? Where
Right.
I have certain friends and I have 10 friends. Out of my 10 friends, 2 of them share similar likes like me. And this guy purchased orange drink and I have a good possibility. So they send me an offer, a tailored offer to me while I am going to buy a drink, by the way. It is not that while I'm going to buy shoe, they offer me an offer on the jeans. Got it, right? That we call is a
Now,
hyper sensitive connected offer. Yeah.
absolutely. So
That's
now
the
this is
thing.
just, you just unlocked for us, when we're on Facebook or we're scrolling on for some news article and you see those targeted ads come on the side. Now we know how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, of course,
But
but
thank you
there
so
are
much.
certain privacy aspects and all that. Those things, yeah, I mean, everything will be there, but that's a different topic to discuss. Yeah. Go ahead,
So that
Priyanka.
actually brings me to my next question. There are multiple audience questions around how security and privacy measures are handled in IoT. What are the chances of a data breach? What are some common measures that can be taken to avoid this? So if you can at least at a high level shed some light on that, Pawan.
See, first of all, one of the when the technology evolves, security also evolves, right? The security problems also evolves.
Mhm.
Earlier, thieves used to come to the house whenever they see the lock, they kind of do the theft. Now, when I put in a Facebook, hey, I'm going somewhere, then they come and do the same job, right? When the technology evolves, the security problems, privacy problems evolves. So that's an ongoing problem. It's not addressed with any technology. It is getting addressed over a period of time. That's a general statement I'm making. The next thing, where the security can come in here. The first thing is the hardware world and the software world, right? The hardware world is already been there for ages and they know how to make their data secure within their own premises, your industrial equipment, let us say. The software world is also there for ages and they are also building their own way once the data enters their software platform.
Mhm.
Now, the security where it is needed is when you are transferring data from hardware to software. That's one of the key area where the security has to be very strong. Otherwise, you're sending data from hardware to software. That is the place where once it enters the software, cloud or on-prem, these things are already there from there, no problem, right? That's one thing. On the privacy aspects, it's extremely important. The more and more we open the things, the more it gets into the privacy issues. For example, as I mentioned, that in order to calculate a dwell time of a person at a supermarket, we need to know is a person or an animal over there. We don't need to know if the person is Pawan, right? So the technologies, there
Yeah.
are around 15 to 20 that exist to identify that, by the way. Camera is the most sophisticated form, but that reveals it's Pawan as well, right? So there are some technologies that exist which can anonymize, which can figure out a unique customer and all that. And people are doing more and more research to ensure the anonymity. This is extremely important, yeah.
Got it. Got it. So I just, again, the two major key takeaways is number one, like you said, as technology is evolving, security is also evolving. So that's the biggest, blanket statement. And the second part is the key focus area would be then the transition or conversion of data from the hardware to the software becoming the biggest key aspect in terms of focusing on privacy. Right. So thank you so much
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
Another question is, for an organization to bring their brownfield devices into an IoT ecosystem, it's very challenging because of huge costs and technical challenges associated to it. Before migration, how can these organizations realize and calculate their costs and risks? Something about lots of PF offering with prototyping strategy, but they're not useful because of complexity. So how do you see the opportunity for processes being adapted by these companies in order to bring this kind of transformation?
Okay. So first of all, one more myth, right? When we talk about IoT, we always talk about, okay, connected devices. We always talk about the devices are going to second data every second and talk about multiple devices are getting connected, right?
Mhm.
But what is extremely important is you need to identify the use case and then for that use case, based on that, you embed that many sensors. That way you ensure the price can be come down. I'll give an example of smart cooler, right? I showed in the very first slides one smart cooler sending 4 values. Now this particular beverage company said, hey, you know what, I wanted to ensure all my refrigerators I give it for free to different retailers. I don't know what they are doing and all. Okay, I don't know whether they're maintaining correctly. I don't know whether they're using for my own product or competitor product, right? Now, the number of problems increase, the number of monitoring aspects increase, the number of sensors will increase. So now we asked how many coolers, such coolers do you have? They said, oh, we have close to 10 lakhs. Now we told, okay, why don't you go with these 4 sensors and do a prototype? This perfectly well. It went well, and these 4 sensors with the SIM and everything put together costed close to probably maybe $50 or something. Okay, now they have how many 10 lakh coolers. Now 10 lakhs into $50 is so expensive, right? Now what is extremely important is a use case. Okay, how many of them do you need extreme monitoring, and how many of them do you need just a monitoring, right? So what they mentioned is, okay, we have 10 lakh coolers. Out of them, few handful of them were kept in supermarket, 5-star and 7-star hotels and airports where they need extreme engagement. Then we told, okay, put some 50 sensors are used, put speaker, camera, this, that, LED screen, everything. Then the cost of the sensors set has gone to 4,000 euros for a 1,000 euro refrigerator. Okay, and then you are doing lot many things over there. And in the second set of coolers, where they put it in the supermarket, we said, okay, there you just keep the temperature, location, and few others. So it can tell you if the cooler is moved, if it will tell you the temperature and door open and other things. Yeah. The third set of coolers are in the mom and pop shops. They just wanted to do a passive monitoring by keeping a Bluetooth BLE beacon. So now what most of the times IoT projects fail because the moment we heard the IoT, we think, oh, we need to keep a lot of sensors. We need to send a lot of continuous data. I talked about a lot of sensors just now. The second aspect is a lot of data. If it is a cooler, do I need to do really a prediction? Someone asked me, oh, can your software do IoT application do prediction and tell when the cooler will fail? Yes, of course, it can do. But it is utter waste from the business standpoint, because if I need to do prediction, I need to send every second data from the refrigerator, all the sensor values over the cloud, and do calculations, which will cost 3-4 times more than the cost of the cooler. I am okay if it goes wrong, I'll throw and I buy a new one. Right? So these are the two aspects where IoT projects fail, where people consider, okay, I wanted to have as many as possible sensors, or I wanted to send as much as possible data. You don't need. Based on the use case, mission critical and everything, you decide number of sensors, you decide the frequency, and then you start the POC. Once the technical feasibility is done, then you get into a real mode. Then it gets into a good state. Hope that clarifies, right?
Got it. Thank you so much, Pavan. Again, there are multiple questions coming in, so I'm just going to try and pick what I think would be the most relevant for a larger audience. There's a question on, when deciding the ratio of on-prem or edge computing to the cloud IoT-based computing, in an organization, what are the parameters that should be taken into consideration?
Okay, so the 2 parameters. One is a mission criticality. The other one is a cost. I'll give one more example, right? I mean, there's a windmill, and near the windmill, there's a video sensor. Okay, video camera, and this video camera captures throughout the day to ensure basically their problem is again a practical problem. It's not a fiction one, but their problem, this customer problem, was the dogs used to come over there, or the people used to go there and drink and throw bottles over there. A lot of other issues were there near the windmill, because windmill is located at near on top of the hill, right, in a nice location. So the video camera captures that if someone enters in that particular region, an alert will be sent to the responsible person. Okay, right? Now, do you think you need to send all this 24/7 data all the way to cloud? It's a lot of cost. 24/7 video data sending to cloud. And all the data is useless over there. You only need the data when someone enters, right? So in this use case, I disregard everything. I only keep a week's of data or 2 days of data when there is an event happens, or I only keep the data when event happens. So I do edge computing only for that purpose, and I even disregard all the data. The other case is a mission criticality case. I mean, where a drilling machine does the drilling in a mining scenario, or a ship, right? I mean, they can't wait until the round trip happens. The sensor sends the data goes all the way to the cloud, and it takes under 15 minutes to come back. Right? By the time this person must have injured already, correct? So, I mean, practically it happened to me in another way where we had this vending machine in an event location where many people connected their mobile phones and everything to the common Wi-Fi. It jammed the signals so that one of the, sorry, this person, ex-US president, tried accessing the vending machine to get the cola. And then he swiped the card, money has been detected, but the cola came after he left 10 minutes.
Okay.
So here it's not a mission critical case. I just told for the sake of, giving the relativity. But whereas if this happens in a mining scenario, you can't afford that, right? So these are the two factors: cost and a quick response and round trip is needed. You do that process in edge computing, rest all in cloud computing. If I need to conclude finally, right? Edge computing is more like, a routine processing, what you do with your brain. Routine processing, your subconscious, that it is like your subconscious processing. Cloud computing is something where you need to use your superior brain, where critical things needs to be taken care. That's how I kind of analyze and classify.
Got it. Thank you so much. Okay, so just two more questions before we wrap up. I know we might go a couple of minutes over time, but I hope that's okay. First question would be, is there a need for organizations to unlearn certain specific ways of operating to be able to fully leverage, IoT and IoT philosophy into their systems? But if I had to rephrase, I'd say, are there any practices that may inhibit the maturity journey of an IoT application?
Sorry, I missed it. Can you repeat that? Sorry, Priyanka.
No problem. So the question is there a need for organizations to unlearn certain specific ways of operating in terms of fully leveraging IoT in their applications?
No, there's nothing like unlearn. So if you observe, I mentioned earlier examples also, right? Every organization will have business processes like time recording and all those things, right? Multiple business processes. You don't need to unlearn. The business processes are not going to change. But what will change is you need to identify those gaps where you can glue that with this technology and sensors so that the entire process becomes efficient, right? So there's nothing like an unlearning is needed. Rather, you need to identify that gaps to fill with the sensor data. Say, for example, we record the time, right? How many hours we worked in a day. Imagine that you also, while coming in, you also swipe your card. So based on the number of, based on the card swipe, that can feed into your time recording system. You're not changing the time recording process. Rather, you're making it a little more efficient and intelligent, right? I might record it as 8 hours, but I've gone in between out for 6 hours. Correct? So that's what I mean by. So you need to identify gaps.
Shift in that sense. Got it.
Yeah, exact perspective shift. Exactly. Yeah.
Great, got it. Thank you so much, Pawan. So I think in the interest of time, one last question that I'd love to leave the audience with before we wrap up the session. What are some of the key trends emerging in this space during or post-COVID that you'd like our audience to know about?
So as you already told in the early of the session, right? Enterprises are facing with a lot of challenges like Brexit or the trade wars or the COVID pandemic and all these things, right? Especially during COVID pandemic, right? Companies are assessing how if their assets are set up for remote diagnostics or not, if they are set up for remote monitoring or not, if they are set up for remote management or not, right? They are assessing, is it possible or not? And to pursue this task remotely, one need to have access to the IoT data and sensor data, and that's a prerequisite, right? So, and these are and we call such assets which sensor data, we call them as a smart products, and we lack such a smart products in the market nowadays. Right. So my hypothesis, we can see a surge in the such smart products in the coming 12 to 18 months. There could be a lot of need to have these kind of smart products in the market, which can remotely does the monitoring, diagnostic, servicing, and other things. Yeah, that is one aspect. The second aspect is IoT enabled real-time inventory management, because companies want to maintain lean inventory. Now we are all at home and trying to order certain things. The entire of your supply chain need to work intact, right? And no one want to maintain huge amounts of material also, correct? And also they don't want to they want to avoid wastages as well and free up liquidity, correct? So IoT enabled real-time inventory management, right? Or digital supply chain, I call it as. That's another area where we can see a lot of trend. And the third one, of course, is lot of what do you say, the factories, which once they open, they want to ensure the employees are adhering to COVID precautions and all that, the safe distancing norms and all that. So such kind of a solutions also we can see a lot of surge in the coming future. And interestingly, one of the factory, right, they staggered the breaks and they rearrange its shifts based on the IoT insights recently. Yeah.
Got it. So if I just had to summarize, I think you mentioned around 3 trends. The first one was the acceleration of the development of smart products in today's day and age. Everything is remote now. The second point was IoT-enabled real-time inventory management for lean inventory. And then the final one was safety and health-related, especially in the times of COVID, safety and health-related products.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. I think that's all we have time for today, Pavan. One more thing that I'd like to reiterate that you mentioned was, we've seen the shift into Internet of People, and now Internet of Things will be the real future. So just wanted to leave the audience with that. Pavan, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you. Thank you so much. For everyone listening in, I hope this session helped in addressing some of the questions you may have had with respect to leveraging IoT and edge computing. I know that there were a lot of questions we weren't able to get to. So what we will try to do is just drop a note to Pavan, and if he's able to share some of the responses offline, we'd be happy to get back to you on any of those. For all of those asking about the recording and a copy of the slides, please drop us a note at events@thezinnov.com, and we'd be happy to share a version of the recording with you, maybe a summarized version of the slides as well. But please do drop us a note, and we'll definitely get back to you. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you, Pavan, once again.